230,000 American women put on a military uniform this morning and reported for duty to defend the United States Constitution. And yesterday, the man who commands them invited a pastor into the Pentagon who believes every single one of them should be stripped of their constitutional right to vote. Not some of them, not the ones who disagree with him politically, all of them. Because they are women. I have the pastor's exact words on the record. I have the proof that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth not only knows about these views, but financially supports the church that preaches them. And I have the Pentagon's official statement refusing to deny that the secretary agrees. This is not about religious freedom. This is about whether the United States military, an institution that swears an oath to defend the Constitution, can be led by a man who welcomes into the Pentagon a religious leader calling for the repeal of a constitutional amendment. That is the question. And yesterday, the Pentagon gave us an answer. Let me start with the women, because they are the ones whose rights are actually at stake here. The United States Armed Forces currently has 231,431 active duty women serving. That number does not include reservists. That is just active duty. These are women serving in every branch. There are 74,000 women in the Army, 69,000 in the Navy, 43,000 in the Air Force, 14,000 in the Marine Corps, over 230,000 women who volunteered to serve their country, who passed the same physical tests, who deployed to the same combat zones, who took the same oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Comment right now if you are a woman who has served in the military, or if you know one. I want you to tell me in the comments what you think of what I am about to show you. Yesterday, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth hosted Pastor Doug Wilson at the Pentagon for the monthly Christian worship service. The Pentagon posted official photos of Hegseth standing with Wilson. The event was promoted through official Department of Defense social media accounts, and Pastor Doug Wilson is on the record on camera in multiple interviews saying that women should not be allowed to vote. Here are his exact words from a CNN interview in 2025. Wilson said that in his ideal vision for America, women would not vote. He said families should vote as a single household unit, with the husband and father casting the vote. He said women are the kind of people that people come out of. Not human beings with intellect or agency, but vessels for reproduction. He said it doesn't take any talent to simply reproduce biologically. When asked about women in leadership, Wilson said his church has 0 women in any leadership positions because the Bible says not to. And his executive pastor, Jared Longshore, said on camera that he would support repealing the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. The amendment ratified in 1920 that gave women the right to vote. Pause this video, take that in. The Secretary of Defense of the United States invited this man into the Pentagon to speak to American troops. Now here's the part that makes this even worse. Pete Hegseth did not accidentally stumble into association with Doug Wilson. Hegseth is a confirmed dues-paying member of a church that is part of Wilson's network, the Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches, known as CREC. In 2022, Hegseth moved his entire family to Tennessee specifically to enroll his children in a Christian school that Doug Wilson helped found. When Hegseth held his first Christian prayer service at the Pentagon earlier this year, he brought in the pastor from his Tennessee CREC church to lead it. Hegseth has attended the opening of Wilson's new church in Washington, D.C., and in August 2025, when CNN published a profile of Wilson and his views on women, Hegseth reposted the entire video on social media with the comment, "All of Christ for all of life." The Pentagon press secretary was asked at the time if Secretary Hegseth agreed with Wilson's views. The official statement said, and I am quoting the exact words, "The Secretary is a proud member of a church affiliated with the Congregation of Reformed Evangelical Churches, which was founded by Pastor Doug Wilson. The Secretary very much appreciates many of Mr. Wilson's writings and teachings." That is the Pentagon, on the record, saying the Secretary of Defense appreciates the teachings of a man who wants to repeal women's voting rights. Hit subscribe and tap the bell right now, because this story is not going away and you need every update the second it drops. Let me show you what this looks like from the perspective of a woman serving in the military under Pete Hegseth's command. You are a female Marine. You enlisted at 18. You went through boot camp at Paris Island. You earned the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. You deployed to Iraq. You came home. You re-enlisted. You made sergeant. You are now responsible for leading a squad of Marines. And your Secretary of Defense just hosted a pastor at the Pentagon who believes you should not be allowed to vote, should not hold your leadership position, and should be home having children instead of serving your country. Or you are a female Navy pilot. You went to Annapolis. You earned your commission. You went through flight school. You qualified on an aircraft carrier. You have flown combat missions. You are a lieutenant commander, and your chain of command includes a Secretary of Defense who is a proud member of a church that says women like you should not exist in the military at all. Or you are a female Army officer, You graduated from West Point. You led a platoon in Afghanistan. You saw combat. You were awarded a Bronze Star. You are now a company commander responsible for 150 soldiers. And the man at the top of your chain of command invited a pastor into your building who says the Constitution should be amended to take away your right to vote. Drop a comment if you think every active duty woman in the military deserves an answer from Pete Hegseth about whether he agrees with his pastor. Now let me show you how this is not just a theoretical debate about religion. This has real consequences. Pete Hegseth has already taken action against a sitting United States Senator, Mark Kelly of Arizona, a Navy combat pilot and NASA astronaut, because Kelly appeared in a video reminding military personnel that they have a duty to refuse illegal orders. Hegseth initiated proceedings to strip Kelly of his retirement rank and reduce his pension. That case is still pending in federal court. Hegseth has purged DEI programs from the military. He has publicly stated that he does not believe women should serve in combat roles. In December 2024, before he was confirmed, Hegseth said on the record, "I'm straight up just saying that we should not have women in combat roles. It hasn't made us more effective, hasn't made us more lethal, has made fighting more complicated." Now connect those dots. Hegseth does not think women should be in combat. His pastor does not think women should vote or hold leadership positions. Hegseth is a member of that pastor's church. Hegseth invited that pastor into the Pentagon, and the Pentagon refuses to say whether Hegseth disagrees with any of it. Here is what Andrew Whitehead, a sociology professor at Indiana University, Indianapolis, and one of the nation's leading experts on Christian nationalism, told NPR about Doug Wilson's movement. Whitehead said the goal is not just to hold these beliefs privately. The goal is enforcement. It's not just they have these personal Christian beliefs about the role of women in the family, Whitehead said. It's that they want to enforce those for everybody. He went on to say that when someone as powerful as the Secretary of Defense amplifies these views, it is not just personal opinion. It really does matter if the Secretary of Defense is retweeting a video with very particular views about whether women should be able to vote or serve in combat roles. That's not just a person's view, it's a person in a pretty broad position of power. Screenshot that. Share it, because an expert is telling you on the record that this is not harmless. Now let me show you how far Wilson's influence has already spread under this administration. Wilson now runs a network of over 150 churches across the United States as part of CREC. He just opened a new church in Washington, D.C., less than 2 miles from the Pentagon. Matthew Taylor, a senior scholar at the Institute for Islamic Christian Jewish Studies, told CNN that Wilson is the avatar or ringleader of a movement known as the Theo Bros, hardline Calvinist Christian nationalist pastors with large online followings who are ascending in influence within MAGA conservatism. Trump created a White House faith office earlier this year. Hegseth instituted monthly Christian prayer services at the Pentagon. Defense Department employees have reported receiving invitations to these services in their official government email accounts during working hours. And when Doug Wilson's church in Idaho was denied a building permit by the town of Troy over parking and traffic concerns, the Trump Justice Department sued the town on behalf of Wilson's church. That lawsuit is still ongoing. The federal government is using taxpayer money to fight a small town zoning board so that Doug Wilson's church can expand. Let me read what Wilson himself said after Hegseth was confirmed as Secretary of Defense. Wilson said it was very encouraging to see Hegseth unapologetically defending his beliefs. Then Wilson said this: "Everybody who loves the Lord in Washington, D.C. will tell you how much they're up against, and it's not anywhere close to being done. It's barely started." Wilson is telling you in plain English that his movement's efforts to impose Christian nationalist policies on the federal government have barely begun, and he has the Secretary of Defense in his congregation. Drop a comment. Do you think Congress has a constitutional duty to investigate this? Here is what Kristen Kobes-Dumez, a history professor at Calvin University and author of a book on Christian nationalism, told the 19th News. She said Doug Wilson used to be a fairly fringe figure in Christian circles, but that has changed. His ideas are becoming mainstream within conservative Christianity because people in power are giving him platforms. And Wilson himself has said publicly that his movement is playing a long game. He told the Associated Press that repealing the 19th Amendment is not a top priority right now because they are being strategic. They build institutions, they groom candidates, they slowly normalize ideas that would have seemed radical a decade ago. And then, when the moment is right, they act. Does that sound familiar? That is exactly what happened with Roe v. Wade. For 50 years, people said it was settled law, then it was gone. Now here is the constitutional question at the center of this. The Secretary of Defense is a civilian position appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. The person in that role commands the United States Armed Forces. The military swears an oath to support and defend the Constitution. Not a king, not a president, not a pastor, the Constitution. And the 19th Amendment is part of that Constitution. It says in plain English, the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. If the Secretary of Defense is a member of a church that openly advocates for repealing that amendment, and if he invites the pastor of that church into the Pentagon to preach to American troops, is he upholding his oath to support and defend the Constitution? That is the question every senator who voted to confirm Pete Hegseth needs to answer. Doug Pagitt, a pastor and executive director of the progressive evangelical organization Vote Common Good, said Hegseth amplifying Wilson's views is very disturbing. Even within Christianity, Wilson's positions are considered extreme, but they are not fringe anymore. They are inside the Pentagon. They are inside the White House faith office. They are being normalized at the highest levels of the federal government. Here is what happens next. Every member of Congress needs to be asked on the record, do you believe the Secretary of Defense should publicly state whether he supports the 19th Amendment? Do you believe women should have the right to vote? Do you believe Christian nationalist pastors who call for the repeal of constitutional amendments should be given platforms inside the Pentagon during working hours using taxpayer-funded government resources? And every active duty woman in the United States military deserves an answer from her chain of command. Does the Secretary of Defense believe you have the right to vote? Does he believe you should be serving in the military at all? Does he agree with his pastor that you should be home having children instead? Those are not theoretical questions. Those are questions about rights that exist right now under the Constitution, and the Pentagon will not answer them. Subscribe right now if you want every update on this investigation. Share this video because the national media is barely touching it. And if you believe that every American has the right to know where their Secretary of Defense stands on women's constitutional rights, make your voice heard in the comments. This is just the beginning.